Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Your Money, Your Life podcast. Thank you for joining us wherever you are listening. This is episode 171. Make sure wherever you're listening or watching the podcast, you like, subscribe, 5-star rate, review, comment, so we can stay tapped in and you can know what we're doing every week where we give the business personal finance news. This week, there is a decent bunch to go through this week. Some exciting developments that we need to touch on. So we'll get into it here in a second. First and foremost, let's get into the market update. The market update of the week was, if you look at what the market's done the past week, it's been kind of a big drop that we saw earlier the week. And then we saw a resurgence yesterday based on the CPI data that we got, the consumer price index data that we received, pretty much gave us a decent overview of what inflationary prices looked like in April. So if you remember, the consumer price index is a big index that tells us, how inflationary pressures are affecting consumers month over month. So it comes out every month and it gives us a good gauge on what's going on with consumer prices. It also informs the Fed on what's going on with consumer prices, and it's going to really kind of dictate how they take the monetary and fiscal policy going forward. So if you look at it, the report showed 4.9% inflation rate year over year, which is the lowest reading we've had in 2 years, but there's still a few consumer prices that are stickier on inflation, like food, that's still sticky, and those prices are still rising month over month and obviously on a year over year data. So it really means the Fed is still in a very, very uncomfortable position where they have to continue to slow down growth and control price inflation, but not plunge us into a recession. So that's going to be super hard because now you have the regional banking crisis and a credit crunch, which means that banks aren't going to lend as much. They aren't going to lend as easier. People aren't going to want even to take out loans because of interest rates where they're at right now. So that is undoubtedly going to slow down the economy. That's just math. If you have less people borrowing to spend, it slows down the economy overall. So, how much it slows down the economy is yet to be seen, because we're going to see companies have less demand when there's less money floating around. M2, which is a measure of pretty much money in the economy, is dropping for the first time. We've seen that drop in a long, long time. And so there are some factors that point to a general slowdown in the economy. We already know this just based on what's been going on. So that's what's driving the market. Although we did see the market rise on a lower inflation data, but today we're lower just because of a few things. Banks, the regional banks are coming back into the news. PacWest, one of the regional banks that seems to be the next one that's in trouble. They had a report on their deposits, and they show that they lost roughly 9% of their deposits, 9.5% of their deposits during the week of May 5th, which is that's a lot of outflows for a bank in a week. That just means that their customers are saying, hey, we don't believe that you guys are going to be able to withstand what's coming in this regional banking crisis, credit crunch. So the liquidity is down. Their share price dropped. It's pulling down other regional banks that might be in trouble. And it's pulling down the general market a little bit today just because, people are reading into this credit crunch a little bit more and what it may mean for stocks overall if you have, different banks toppling and troubled, and what it means for the economic backdrop when you have inflation and now a credit crunch piled into it as well. So the Fed is going to have to juggle that when it gets to June meeting, when they decide if they're going to pause or not. Right now, the market is anticipating a pause, meaning we've seen 25 basis point rate hikes for the last couple of meetings. But now, people are anticipating a pause of that, which would mean rates would stay where they're at. And then later, the market's anticipating the cut, which we don't know we'll see so far. More market news. Peloton had to recall $2.2 million bikes of safety concerns for the bike seat. So that's interesting news. The company, as a public company, has struggled. Still a great product that I use, but the company itself is in a lot of trouble. So yeah, a lot of people, again, as we're talking about, people are saying that we have inflation data that's saying that we have a pause. But if you look at the compounded inflation data, meaning from 2021 to 2023, that's all compounded. So the rate is compounded on each other each year. We have so much inflation that it's really incredibly interesting to see. So that's the big market news right now. Let's move into actual current news of the past week. The Google Developer Conference was yesterday, and it's actually pretty interesting. So I've stood on the side of Google doing really, really well in this AI machine learning race. Microsoft jumped out to a big lead with ChatGPT and their investment in ChatGPT, and they influxed it and integrated into Bing. But again, I've tried the product and I didn't find it that appealing. But I've always been on the side of Google doing really, really well, at least from the consumer standpoint. It's yet to be seen about the enterprise standpoint or business to business standpoint, but Google doing really well from the consumer standpoint, just because of the mass amount of data they have, and they're still the worldwide leader in search and have been so for a long, long time. So they unveiled new AI tools at the developer conference, pretty much stating that they're going to integrate AI into search. They have a lot of different cool different things that they hope to do with AI within search and within just in general within their company. And so this was met by actual applause from investors. Remember, Bard initially was met by a little disappointment, but this time it was met by investors liking what they were seeing, and the stock rose on this news. And again, I stated that Google will do well in this race, especially from a consumer standpoint. They also unveiled a foldable phone that is going for $1,800 in case anyone's interested. I've always been an iPhone person. I'm still on that train. I've had different phones before. I had a Samsung. What's the other Samsung Google one I had a while back? I had two phones, but Kevin Gates like. But I'm actually sticking with the iPhone on that. But again, the AI tool is doing well. The investors liked it, and that's what we said long term they would do really well in this. And I think I've been pretty right on those predictions. I said near term Microsoft would see a bump. Long term, I think Google wins, and that's what I've said. But again, it's gonna be space and play where multiple players, and it's not gonna be one person that has all market share when it comes to AI. That just wouldn't make sense. But of course, you want to be the winner in that regard. So that's the big news there. More big news as far as business news this week. There was a bit, Goldman Sachs, I don't know if you guys saw, but they settled a $215 million gender discrimination lawsuit. They had a boys club, good old boys club, which isn't surprising, especially among the higher ranks like vice presidents. The suit said that investment banking, Goldman Sachs, was paying female vice presidents 20% less than the male VPs, and they got called out by this. And so they're settling for $215 million. They're going to pay about almost 3,000 women. So that's about 47,000 minus legal fees. So they'll probably walking away with 30,000 each. Settlement also requires Goldman to hire an outside expert to look into performance reviews, promotions, and pay equity. So that's interesting part there. It's really good that they won suit and won. But this is happening across a lot of other companies, whether it's banking, for sure, banking and different corporates. You're going to see this come out more. There is good old boy culture in corporate, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate for those who have to be subject to that, to be honest. So something to look out for. Hey, do more class action suits if you can. Put together the data, and win some of your own coins there. Not a bad thing to do. So the U.S. debt ceiling, it's another thing we didn't talk about in the market. The U.S. debt ceiling is fast approaching. We are the world's largest economy, and we have a debt ceiling problem where the government could hit this debt ceiling as soon as June 1st. If elected officials fail to reach an agreement to raise the debt ceiling, that will be, economic catastrophe if we don't do it. They always, come to this thing where it's like, oh, they're not going to raise it, or it's the ninth hour and then it always gets raised. So it's something to stay on top of, tangentially, but I think it gets raised, and everything moves forward as planned. So that's to be seen. So Twitter's in the news again. There was an announcement that Tucker Carlson, who was fired at Fox, is actually going to be moving over to Twitter and doing some show there, whatever that is. So yeah, that's just the big news on Twitter so far this year. So, there's just generally a decent amount of stuff going on in the market and the news. Another big thing we want to touch on in the roundtable, there's a big discussion, not a big discussion, but there's kind of a resurgence of such discussion around credit repair, credit scores, If you look at your, again, we've talked about this, I think in a 2 or 3 episodes past, but I want to touch on it again. If you look at your credit score, the biggest factors are payments, credit history. Payments, obviously, late payments is the one that takes up 40%, roughly 40% of your credit score algorithm. Credit history, revolving credit amount of credit you can use. There's also, and this is a kind of like in order as far as like how much they impact your credit score. Also, hard inquiries. So when you actually apply for a credit card, that's a hard inquiry. So if you're always applying for cards, that's usually like a sign of that you have less liquidity, and so it means that it's going to potentially ding your credit score, but it's a smaller percentage on that portion, roughly like 3% of your combined score. So those things that affect your credit score. So having your balances can also, if you have a high balances on all your credits, that's another area as well. So, those are things that will heavily affect it. And what you want to do and what we've seen is you can fix it. And people that have poor credit, you can fix things. One, don't listen to the people telling you don't pay your debts. Like that's like your credit card. I've heard people talk about don't pay your credit card debt or any of these things. Like definitely should and have to pay it. You want to do your own fixing of your credit without using a credit repair place, and you don't need to. You can obtain your credit report from the bureaus, right? It's free for you. You can just obtain it through your banking app or on any of the websites of the bureaus, Experian, FICO, any of them, right? And then you go through any of your reports and look for any past due debts, errors, or inaccuracies, things that could be damaging to your score. So you have to know what you're up against by looking through and finding it. They'll list everything out there for you. Your debts, owed, things that are in collection, any of those items will be out there for you. Then you want to take action. If there's smaller debts, you could pay them off, I'm assuming. If they're ones that are larger and midterm range, you could probably negotiate lower payments to collectors because they've written these things off. So you could negotiate payments or even lower payoffs and tell them to, so you could get it wiped out. And you want to do this to get it wiped off your credit report. So you would negotiate with them that you want it wiped off your credit report. If there's any inaccuracies, things that you don't remember, things that are, not true, bad open accounts that weren't opened or things that don't recognize, you can dispute them with the credit bureaus to also get them removed. And these things will have a really, really good impact on your score, right? I've seen clients, jump their score 175 to 100 points just based on these items getting done. So that's a great way to look at it if you're someone that's struggling with this or looking to boost your credit score before buying a house or getting a car loan, especially when rates are much, much higher right now. And this could be helpful for lowering your rate or moderating your rate in this certain time. So things to keep in mind, especially in our roundtable. But folks, this is another quick, fun week of personal news, economic news, and business news, personal financial news. For those watching the NBA playoffs, it's been a crazy playoff so far. I'm hoping the Lakers can pull out. They need to win game 6. I was surprised that they're even up 3-2. You got my New York Knicks. Actually, I'm a Lakers fan, but I'm in New York, so I have to say I'm a New York fan as well. I like them, but they're struggling against the Heat. And then you got on the West, Denver Nuggets trying to close out that series. Then you got Boston, Philly. That one's an interesting one as well. There's a lot of interesting NBA going on. Stay tapped in for those watching. Let me know who your picks are, and we will talk next week.